Player housing in World of Warcraft is something some players have wanted as far back as 2004 when the game launched. I mean, I was looking at some old posts here, and there's a whole bunch of Blizzard replies being like, we can't do housing. It's a huge feature, a lot of dedicated time needed. And that was December of 2004. And I don't think a lot of those people thought that 20 years later, we still wouldn't have it. I mean, games like Star Wars Galaxies had it back then. Games like Final Fantasy have it now, right? So what's the deal with player housing? What's the deal? I figured we'd just talk about player housing today. You know, the pros, the cons, garrisons, and have a big discussion because I have always wanted player housing. And so I just kind of want to talk about what I want from it, what I don't really want from it, and just to get everybody's opinion on that. So the first thing I think I want to talk about is garrisons, because that's as close to player housing as we've gotten. And a lot of times when people bring up player housing, they bring up garrisons, right? People go, oh, I just really want player housing. And they're like, we tried that. We tried garrisons, right? It didn't work out. But garrisons were bad. They were not good. They were a very poorly implemented version of player housing. They were kind of the primary focus almost of that expansion. They're like, get your garrison, right? And it seemed like you were going to be able to put it wherever you wanted, but it became clear as the game launched that you only had one choice, and it was either Horde place or Alliance place. So I guess technically two, but one depending. And then it was just very uninspired, very bland, right? You know how if you have a player house in some other game, you're like, oh, look at the way I decorated it. Look at the way I have this, you know, I'm showing off some of my achievements and stuff over here, right? In Garrison, it was like, oh, what's your Garrison look like? Oh, wow, it looks like mine. You changed that one thing there. That's pretty cool. Oh, and you built that building instead of that building? Anyway, I'm going to go home. Right, and then, you know, all the mobile game type stuff implemented it. It was very clear that it was also designed to be tied into playing on your phone, which also didn't go very well. And so it was just a mosh posh modge podge jumble of garbage. Like it was just bad. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, that's their try at it. But I feel like they really could make a solid attempt at player housing. Now, we do have quotes from various Blizzard developers over the years being like, it's just impossible. Like in 2010 during Gamescom, Tom Chilton declared that housing will be introduced to World of Warcraft sometime right after never. Granted, these are also the same developers that said, you know, classic WoW, you don't want that. Nobody's going to play that. You think you do, but you don't. In April 2019, however, the developers stated that they are still thinking about how to implement this feature without it feeling too clumsy. So they are still thinking about it. And I know in 2022, just last year, I know Ian was interviewed by Hazelnutty Games, and she asked him about player housing. And he pretty much talked about how it's something that many of them do want, but it's a big undertaking. It's not going to be done in just one expansion like Dragonflight. You know, there's only two types of garrisons, and back in WoD, if a Blood Elf player wanted like Silver Moon architecture, they wouldn't really get that, and it would cost a raid tier, right? Now, I always joke that I would give up some raid tiers for player housing. There's a couple raids I could think of. You know what? I'd give up Shadowlands for player housing. I know, I'm going out on a limb right there, but I'd give up Shadowlands for player housing. They'd call me crazy, but I do understand what they're saying, right? Like, if you make player housing in one expansion, then it gets outdated when that expansion gets outdated, essentially, right? Or you're stuck in the past. But I think that's one of the best reasons why player housing could just be in Azeroth. It's also a reason that if they do an Azeroth revamp, it's possible that that's when player housing would be introduced, right? So let's talk about the pros of player housing right now. Okay, so it's a place to hang out with your friends. I think that's one of the things that people love about player housing, right? It's a thing that encourages social activity in a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. It encourages multiplaying, it encourages role-playing, and it encourages just hanging out with friends, which that's pretty much what a lot of life tends to be. And then you also can decorate and show off things, which I mentioned. You know, it'd be great if you could show off your mounts. Maybe you have like a stable area or like a backyard area where you could have like different mounts just chilling out, or it just picks a couple of the mounts you have, or you could swap them out and have them just chilling in your yard or whatever. That's kind of fun. Okay, funnily enough though, the garrison does have this. I went back to the garrisons and I was like, oh yeah, look, they actually do that. And it is pretty cool. But nobody goes to garrisons, so nobody even knew. So they already have the technology for that as well. And look, they're even taking very good care of my Tazavesh gear glider, feeding it, you know, making sure it's happy. So yeah, you could have gear that you have shown off on the wall, like transmogs you've collected. You know, there's plenty of different ideas you could do with that. You know, different furniture, different things. Then you have the benefit of professions. You know, you could have different professions do things in the player housing, right? Or you can create new professions, right? Like woodworking is the most common one I've heard, where you're making tables and chairs and, you know, you're crafting the furniture for the houses or the actual houses themselves, I guess, for customization. But I'm sure there's also various ways you could have the current professions also contribute to the housing. Like maybe engineers can make some crazy light fixture you can hang on the wall, or whatever. I mean, listen, we got like Animal Crossing now, all right? All these games, you probably figure out a few things you do with the current professions, right? And I don't think a lot of these would have to even have brand new assets. Like, oh, we got to create all these new tables and chairs. Like, sure, you would have to, but there's plenty of old assets. I mean, this game has so many assets in it going back 20 years, right? Like, even though some of the old stuff is pretty old, I guess they wouldn't want to use old stuff at that point, but you know, there's a lot of things, especially now when they seem to keep updating and updating more and more. I don't think it would be that big of an issue to find all these assets, but I'm also not a game developer, so that's the other issue, right? It's easy for people like me and for people playing the game to be like, just do this. What's the problem, right? So, I mean, maybe I'm just, you know, acting like it's a little too easy. Maybe they are right. Maybe there's, you know, player housing is this giant undertaking. But I guess my point is that I feel that it is an undertaking worth doing. You know, it's something that players love in various games. And I think another reason for the pros is that it promotes playing and exploring the game. You want to play the game to get stuff for your house. You want to do professions to get stuff for your house, right? You want to learn crafting so you can craft stuff. You want to, you know, craft stuff for the economy. You can make money doing this, right? It's just everything kind of ties together. And then, you know, you're like, oh, that'd be really cool in my house, but I have to go do this old raid to get it, right? Or get this old transmog or get whatever it might be to put it in my house. And I think that's just cool. It's another reason to play the game when you're in that kind of downward slope, right? When you're down here and there's no big patch for a while or expansion release for a while, and you're like, hey, you know what? I don't got a lot of stuff to do, but I can like chill in my house and get my house some cool customizable stuff and find some stuff for my house and show off and hang out with people. It's like, it just makes sense to me that it would be something you'd want to implement and then improve upon through various expansions. Like, they are correct. It seems like it is a lot, which leads us to our first con, which is the developer cost, right? It's a lot of work and effort to put all this stuff into the game. But I feel like once you establish that, you can kind of grow it from there, right? Like, you can keep adding more furniture and more stuff throughout patches and expansions and just build upon it. And the main thing for me is keeping it in the old world, right? If it's like in Orgrimmar, Stormwind, like, those aren't going anywhere, right? If you just keep those in those places, that's fine. Now, I guess that's when it starts getting a little like, well, what if you want to have it over here? Well, you could do that in future expansions, right? Like maybe in the future expansion after the one you've implemented it in, where you're like Orgrimmar, Stormwind, and the next expansion, you're like, hey, you know what? You can go to Thunderbluff now. You can go to all the major cities now. And then maybe the expansion after that, they're like, okay, now we made it so you can go to different zones, right? You can just pick up your house and move it. Again, this might be extremely difficult, and I don't know about the developer implications or workload or whatever it might be, right? But it just, to me, it makes sense. But I don't know. The only other thing I saw was storage as a thing for player housing, like as a pro, like storage. But storage, I don't really care. Maybe storing your furniture would be all right, but You got banks. You don't really need more storage. You got banks, you got inventory slots, you got transmog storage. Like, I don't think you need more storage. Like, I think that's something they don't have to worry about with player housing. So, I don't know. Some other cons that I saw just from reading around was the lore implications from it. I read somebody be like, the lore implications, you're supposed to be this big hero and you got a house. And I was like, okay. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Blizzard retcons their own lore all the time anyway. Like, I don't know. Who cares about the lore implications? And they said storage makes banks less meaningful. Again, like, that's fine. I don't need storage in player housing. And then the other big one I saw as a con to player housing was creating more things to manage, which I guess could be a con, because that is another element of stuff to learn in the game and to manage and to go to and all this stuff. But I would argue that I wouldn't really want player housing to be something that I have to kind of manage and work out daily. You know, like at garrisons, right? At garrisons, you had to like go do your mining and your herbalism and your quests here and there and get your resources. Like, I don't want that. I just want a house that I can customize and make it look cool, and then be like, hey, everybody, come look at my house. And then you like keep redecorating it and adding stuff and showing off stuff. That's it. I don't need all these little mini games and like things attached to it. It's just, that's all I would want personally. You know, other people may disagree. If you do, comment down below and let me know. But that's really all I would want from player housing, is just a cool place to hang out with people, decorate, show off collectibles and stuff, customize, almost like you're playing Animal Crossing. And again, I think that people just want like World of Warcraft, Animal Crossing style housing. So that's really all I got about player housing. Again, let me know in the comments section what you think about player housing. Are you for it, against it? How would you do it? Do you agree, disagree, all that stuff? But I did just want to have a little discussion about it, because I was just thinking about it the other day and I was like, man, I really would like player housing. So let me know. Also, if you want to check out the latest Pointless Top 10, there's a whole playlist of the last Pointless Top 10s. We just had Dark Moon Fair, we had Rats, whole bunch of stuff. You go check it out, all in the playlist right there. Or you can check out this other video of me ranting about World of Warcraft stuff. So thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Okay? Okay. See ya.